So we survived 50 turns in This Is Total War mode as Chaos Undivided on normal difficulty. Great. But let's take it a step further and amp up the difficulty from normal to legendary? Oh, what am I doing to myself? As the embargo on the Ogres dropped yesterday, we might as well do this as them. We will eat the world. This is survive 50 turns in This Is Total War mode. Legendary Edition. Positioned in the southwestern corner of the map, we have the ever-hungry Skrag Slaughterer, a man who appreciates the fine tastes of dwarves, humans and rats on 2 legs. Not sure the last one is sanitary to eat, but whatever. To the north of us we have the meme boy called Karl Franz. More on him soon. First, Skrag was invited to dinner inside Karak Askaras or something. It is not his mistake he misunderstood citizens for dessert. That is how it is really. I should probably also explain some of the Ogre mechanics before this campaign gets heated up. Trust me, we don't have time for that later. Because first, there's this contract feature which is completely useless for us, as we are at war with everyone. So let's forget about that. Second is the food mechanic. You see, ogres like us are always hungry, no matter how much we eat, really. A constant source of food is crucial, and for each unit inside an army, 1 additional food will be consumed. However, you can gain food by staying near a town with a food building inside, or by just being inside the influence of a camp. Which leads us to the third feature for the ogres. We can't have large settlements. They will just be made into smaller ones if we capture them. But instead, we can make camps. They can be placed pretty much everywhere we want them to really, as long as they're not too close to a settlement. More importantly is, the camps completely removes any food consumption by the armies inside their influence. Basically our most powerful tool. They can be great for offensive expeditions deep into enemy territory, or perfect for defensive choke points. They are also extremely fragile if we are not careful, so we have to be smart about where we place them. In case you haven't realized yet, this is my ideal faction. Custom placed settlements, contracts and a bunch of fat dobbers jogging around eating dwarves. There are also a few other features such as big names, offerings to the Great Maw, and pre-battle feasts. Basically just bonuses to improve your armies, if used right. But let's go back to the story. I really wanted to place a camp here in the mountains to form a safe space of operations for us. But I just didn't understand why I couldn't place one down. But that is because we hadn't researched the first technology yet that allowed us to build the camps. This mistake in turn meant Skrag wasted his entire movement, was unable to recruit units, or replenish his army, and just in general was super vulnerable now. It was terrible really. We recruited a slaughtermaster called a Moldrag at Grizzle Valley. There are only 2 ways into our geographic location, so as long as we could hold that town, we would be alright I think. For now, that was his task. Once again, I forgot the whole camp thing and just moved out into enemy territory, which led us to declaring war on yet another enemy. Shit. Skrag was besieging Karak while this happened. But food was depleting rapidly, so a prolonged siege couldn't be made. At least by now, we could form a camp, which we did and didn't waste any time. Furthermore, Karl Dipshit was laying siege to the valley, knowing the longer we waited to deal with this pestilence, the worse it would get. So we basically made an offering to the Great Maw and ate a massive pre-battle feast, and bitch-slapped this worm back to the Reichlands. But like any annoying bug, he would return. This was just turn 5, mind you. Some time went by with us fortifying our position, building garrisons, recruiting units, and slapping down dwarves with Skrag. But this just revealed how fucked we truly were. 3 different forms of ingredients were moving towards us from the west, same from the north, And as I ended turn 9, Karl Franz sent his massive legion of armies towards us. The game predicted a decisive defeat. Let's prove these bastards wrong. Getting attacked from all sides, we tried our hardest to use defeat in detail on the armies from below. Noblers were used as meat shields to slow down the enemies from the upper layer. It was truly a chaotic battle, but as we realized we couldn't fight on this many fronts, I ordered our men to retreat back to the town square. Level 2 towers were our highest priority at this point, because they were both cheap and effective at the same time. Their cover fire and explosive damage was crucial to survive this endless horde of blue warriors. A single ogre was heroic enough to stand on his own, slowing down their foes for as long as possible. But it was actually the Mournfang cavalry that really sealed the deal, with a massive shock charge into the rear of our enemy stuck in a choke point. This could so easily have been the end of this campaign. However, we persevered to survive these first 10 turns in this campaign. Some long-awaited peace on this front at last. Skrag started to create ambushes out west, hoping to catch our foes off guard. But our high upkeep turned into chaos, making us lose gold fast. Running on fumes really, the only thing that kept us afloat was the battle loot from Skrag defeating first the Skaven forces and then the dwarves at turn 13. This gave us a bunch of experience which we used on even more spells to assist us in combat. As we ate all our captives and was inside the influence of our camps to replenish, surprisingly enough we had the strength to finally go on the offensive again. We butchered the humans and dwarves in a combined effort, just outside the settlement for us to out-resolve the town itself afterwards. So many good and important battles so far, but to keep this video short and intense, we have to leave them out. I'm so sorry. I think what has been key to our success so far has been our management of food supply, which allows us to constantly make offerings to the Great Maw and have pre-battle feasts for excellent combat bonuses. I honestly had the time of my life busting around the Skaven forces. Just watching ogres push rats into the air was so satisfying. Plus, as they rout so easily, they make another ogre battle ability even stronger. It is something about killing routing units, I believe. There weren't really any major threat to us, but by taking them out, we were in full control of our little mountain range. By turn 20, this was done. Now, if I only wanted for us to survive 50 turns, I would just stay here and defend our borders. But where's the fun in that, right? We thus formed a new camp on this side so we would be able to go on expeditions in the lands of mankind. With all this progression on the west, it is easy to forget about the eastern frontier. A lot of time had definitely gone by as Skala had returned once more with even more sausages for our bellies. Not attacking or anything, just teasing us by staying near our borders. It was truly terrifying to deal with. However, as time went on and nothing happened, it wasn't a concern any longer. Skrag was also in this weird dance with the armies of Marienburg, trying to catch them in an ambush, but always barely missing the mark. It started to grow quite tedious with me debating whether to just smack them to bits on the open field. Luckily, that was the cue for Emil von Corden to make the exact mistake we had hoped for. It was an honest slaughter which after yet another battle allowed for us to lay siege to Fort Bergbreeze. It wasn't really that big of a deal because we somehow still were in range of our camps. It was ours the following turn, making this our first settlement outside the mountains. Wanting to somewhat secure the left flank before dealing with the Reichlands, we sent Skrag out to pillage Marienburg at the end of turn 30. By the way, don't look at our income. I know I'm playing with fire here, but there is a bit of fun in taking risks. Marienburg was razed to the ground as we didn't really want to push too far ahead just yet, before the other front is secured. For that to be the case, Skrag needed to be as fast as ogre possible in completing his current task. But then, the rifts opened up to the Chaos Realm. A massive problem, as we couldn't really afford to send an army into the other world. Not yet at least. If we did, our land would be overrun by enemies. Instead, over the next few turns, Skrag rushed around to close all the 3 rifts inside our lands. At least he was walking in the right direction as Karl finally ceased his teasing and besieged Grizzle Valley. But just like we all did with our childhood crush, Francis waited too long to act and suffered the consequences for it. Again. Oh yeah, that was without this Firebelly hero that I wasn't able to add into the army before the siege even occurred. A lost Hoshland army made a last-ditch effort to break through, but as this was the weakest of all the human attacks, we had successfully defended our lands for the last time. We pushed into the Reichlands at last. It was so corrupt from chaos that any normal army would take attrition in these environments. Thankfully that is not the case for us, because we once again were in the influence range of our camps. Pretty good, eh? We weren't safe from being outnumbered though. And as I was a bit too confident in my own abilities now after all these victories, I took up this fight too. A valiant mistake that I thankfully realized halfway through the battle. This might be bad, but no consequences came of it. Skrag would appear the following turn, and together they would starve out the town. By turn 42 it was ours. I took this opportunity to make our most aggressive camp yet. Positioned near the river, it was supposed to supply our armies for when we inevitably will reach the other side. Therefore we gave up an entire army and garrisoned it here, just in case our enemies across the strait got any funny ideas. Skrag would, as always, continue his advance on the Empire. There was just this one problem. After we abandoned the west, I forgot to garrison an army out there. Now the vengeful humans of Marienburg have returned with a lust for vengeance. They would raise grim duress and destroy our camp out there. Malkrat, the lad who defended the valley for so long, was on his way to stop them, but with a far smaller army than before. Luckily, he made it, crushing one army before the other could reinforce. However, they would just reinitiate the siege the following turn. Skrag, however, had arrived at Altdorf to break the spirit of our what feels like to be eternal enemy. Just look at all this food inside these walls. They are only a minor hindrance for someone whose guts are as massive as ours. We made parts of the wall explode, for troops to rush in with cover from the Great Maw itself. Noblers scaled the wall to neutralize the towers, and Gorges did whatever they do best. Summoning beasts of war was also key to keep our enemies busy, and while they were occupied with the frontal assault, some of our sneakiest units took a small detour into the enemy backline. They tried to slow us down with barricades, but as we made them explode, everything was over. A feast for days. There was only one fitting outcome from this. Altdorf was sacked, with the gold being invested into new camps this far out. Thoughts about continuing our advance was on my mind, but I fear the momentum we've been feeding upon these last few turns might be over, with us meeting countless enemies lately. There were new fresh legions on their way towards us, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure we can take them on. But as we were only 2 turns away from completing our little challenge here, I couldn't be bothered and just returned home. At the end of turn 50, our situation was as following. We had some pressure on both fronts, but it is nothing we can't deal with. Enemies from way north of the map sailed down to meet us, and an extreme need of gold. The last 2 there, it can be quite a problem, but who knows. Sounds like an average campaign actually. According to the stats, we've only defeated 5 factions, with the Empire and Marienburg being 1 settlement away each from taking part in that statistic. We've also fought 35 battles, 21 of which being done manually, and overall only lost 4 of them, one of which was manually fought. I am personally satisfied with this. Job done.